Thank you for granting me this opportunity. This allows us to give you an independent assessment of the situation in Cuba. In 2017, as we all know, the European Union and Cuba signed a cooperation agreement, and it includes the possibility of it being revised. In the meantime, the Cuban government has hardened its repression and has even come up with new repressive measures. A few years ago, after a migratory reform, it is now once again denying an exit permit, especially to activists and social activists. So there is now a new legal way for the government to prevent people leaving the island. In the case of Guillermo Fariñas, who should be here with us today, is an example of the arbitrary and discretionary way in which the government is acting. There are many reasons why we'd like to ask this Parliament to revise the cooperation agreement between Cuba and the European Union, keeping in mind that when it comes to human rights, the government has not taken any steps to normalize the situation. In January, the government arrested 196 individuals who wanted to carry out civic protests, and also prevented the exit from the country of 14 social activists who had been invited to international fora, including 5 to this parliament who had been invited by Renew Europe. And just like Mr. Fariñas, they were denied an exit permit. I'd also like to say that Jose Daniel Ferrer has been in prison for 5 months now, and he is housed with hardened criminals with no due process, and he faces up to 9 years behind bars. The government has intensified its repression against human rights activists with the intention of them leaving the country. I'd like to mention a specific case because it's very close to my heart, and it really shows how Cuban authorities have hardened their stance against political prisoners. In October, after this EU-Cuba agreement had already been signed, we saw that the death at the age of 75 and after 43 years in jail, Armando Sosa Fortuny, who had spent his life fighting against, or rather trying to restore democracy in Cuba. And the government showed no humanity until his very last breath. Now, this is a topic that's very painful to us. This is someone who I had the honor of sharing a jail cell with for many years. I'd also like to mention some recommendations which we feel should be incorporated into the agreement if we truly wanted to bring direct benefits to the citizens of Cuba. First would be the timeline for the reactivation of agreements. There should be a strict timeline for Cuba to sign up to international agreements relating to social and cultural activities. It should also include the forbidding by law discrimination for political reasons, and this should, as well as doing away with any law that punishes citizens for carrying out their civic duties or protest, and we should also request that they free political prisoners and crack down or stop police repression. There should also be a bringing on board of civil society, which has been excluded thus far. We need a space for democratic and independent dialogue with civil society. There should be an independent body where individuals can bring charges and complaints without going through the very partial government channels when they want to denounce the violation of human rights and basic rights. We are concerned by this situation, and we think that the agreement should force Cuba to follow the ILO's recommendations and do away with the exploitation of workers, which is something that is systematically done by the Cuban government, for example, when it comes to foreign investment. The responsibility of European companies carrying out work in Cuba should also be included. They should follow the same social norms as in their countries of origin, especially those that receive any kind of public funds. Now, regarding the freedom of entering and exiting our country, the Cuban government should stop arbitrarily deciding who can enter and leave the country when they are Cuban citizens, entering and leaving their own country. And we understand that this agreement should also include a conditional entry into force. I don't know if that's possible, but we recommend that there should be a transition period where there is a gradual signing up to the different cooperation agreements that postpones financial assistance until the Cuban government has shown progress in human rights and basic rights, as we've mentioned in other times when we've had the opportunity to speak before this House. And there should be a democratic clause in the agreement which suspends the agreement or establishes how and when the agreement will be suspended in case of systematic violation of human rights. The International Platform for Human Rights in Cuba is convinced that the situation as it stands in the Republic of Cuba would not be accepted in any country in the European Union. We sincerely think it would be a mistake on the part of the EU or any of its member states or political groups to use this their relations with Cuba or with the United States to set up a strategic situation if this tramples on human rights in the process. Otherwise, by doing nothing, you are accepting the situation in Cuba, which is ethically unacceptable. Thank you.